Hello everyone and welcome to Sinful Gaming. I hope you're all doing well, I hope you're all staying safe, and most of all, I hope you're all fighting that war against the grey. Today's video, we've got a getting started with Age of Sigmar 3rd edition video for you, and today we're going to be looking at Nighthaunt. Nighthaunt are the spirits that are brought back into existence by Nagash, the god of undeath, and he sort of torments them in these weird sort of, catch-22s over what they used to be. Hunters are given the skulls of horses and sent out to ride down their foes, and all these other things as well. Well, the chained ghast to criminals and those who died in chains, sort of chained ghosts, the weakest forms of them. It's a really cool sort of concept for the army. Now, in this video, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about exactly what we get with a Nighthaunt army, what it can do, and how it sort of works on the table in a very basic manner. We're also then going to look at what units we should grab to start off our Nighthaunt force, units we can grab later to expand upon our force, and then last of all, we'll give it a little sample army list so you can play around with it and get an idea of how the army works. Now, for starters, let's start talking about what we get with a Nighthaunt army. And first things first, everything in this army flies and everything is ethereal. These are two sort of universal things. They're not allegiance abilities or anything like that, but rather just things that every model in the unit in the army has. Everything can fly, so this is just straight away a great thing, because it means you're ignoring all vertical distances for terrain. This gives you a lot of influence and benefit in the movement phase of the game. And then everything is also ethereal. Now, this is a rule where your saves cannot be modified in any way. You can't get a better save, but you also can't get a worse save. So this means, your 4-up save is always a 4-up. Sure, you can never get down to those impressive 2+ saves like some armies can, but having that 4-up, and not to mention that you are a death army, so yes, you have a version of the death save. So in this case, something like Deathless Mins, you get a 6-up ward whilst you're around some heroes. You can be a 4-up ward and a 4-up save, and a 6-up ward on most of your units in the army, and you'll get that consistently. Now, as you would expect, for an army that flies, this just makes you fast in general, but Nighthaunt do have a decent movement. While not overly fast, you do have a bunch of models that have 6-inch move and stuff like that. So this, combined with the fact you can fly and ignore that vertical terrain, really can make your army seem a lot faster than it actually is. You've also, with Nighthaunt, generally this army has a load of bodies on the table. You haven't got any real major big pieces outside of like the Black Coach or your named characters. You've not got a lot of massive pieces in the army, and you're actually going to be focusing on getting a lot of bodies on the table, and generally in more of a MSU playstyle. You're not going to want to take too many large units. You want to have a couple of large units surrounded by characters that can bring them back, but lots of small units is going to allow you to make full advantage of that fly rule, just to sort of spread out your forces, take your losses where you need to, but also still maintain board control over the table. The army also has a fun and I think interesting charge mechanic, and it's definitely a lot more interesting in the new edition of Warhammer Age of Sigmar. The fun thing about it is, well, every time you roll a charge of a certain distance, you get to attack in the charge phase. This is pretty cool. So this is the rule called Wave of Terror. If you have an unmodified charge roll over 10+ for a friendly Nighthaunt unit, you can immediately fight after it finishes the charge. This does not stop it from being picked to fight in the combat phase. What's cool about this, what's interesting, is how it works with command abilities and stuff like that. Things like all-out defense won't be able to be used against this, as that is required to be used in the combat phase, and this an attack, if you can get this charge off at the 10+, is going to be in the charge phase. This also means that you can't use your own buffs, but it means you're fighting at sort of that base level field, so it's an interesting thing. The army is also, for a new player, really easy to paint. You can paint this army up in no time at all with relative ease, but what's great about it as well is for an experienced painter or as someone who wants to grow their painting skills, it is a great army as well, because there's loads of techniques you can use to do some really interesting things throughout the army. But where do we start? Well, I think first of all, a great place to start is looking at our hero options, and I don't think there's a better hero to go pick up and start with than a Dreadblade Harrow. These are really interesting models. First of all, you do get 2 in a kit. You're probably not going to need 2 to start with, but they are a really interesting unit. I really like their rule where you've got the Phantasmal Discorporation. So if this model is more than 3 inches from any enemy models at the start of your movement phase, instead of making a normal move, you can remove it from the battlefield and set it up anywhere 9 inches away from enemy units. This is a really cool rule and combines really well with the ability for Nighthaunt that gives a command ability to one of your generals to effectively pick up a unit and bring it with them. So you can move your Dreadblade Harrier around the battlefield with this rule and then use a command point to summon another unit next to him, allowing you to effectively teleport him and a unit alongside him for the cost of a command point. It's a really nice thing you could do to sort of get that little bit more movement out of your army. And of course, 9 inches away, you're trying to aim for that 10-inch charge anyway, so pretty cool. Chainrasp Horde are your sort of baseline troop in the army. They're generally quite cheap. They've got 2 attacks each. They do get some cool ways to get some additional buffs. They get reroll wound rolls of 1 if the unit has more than 10 models, which is cool. So rerolls are just great if you can get them anywhere because they're not that common in the game anymore. Chainrasp Horde, they do only have a 5-up save. They can never get any better, but they are the cheap option for just some cheap chaffy troops you can have. Grimghast Reapers are the other option here as well. They're a little bit more, I guess, fighty and more expensive than your Chainrasp. They come in units of 10. And you've got the Reap-like Corn ability where you reroll failed hit rolls of attacks made against units with 5 or more models. So there's a good chance against a lot of units in that first round you're fighting them, you're actually going to get those rerolls to hit. For once again, rerolls are just so uncommon in the game now. Getting them is fantastic. And so after that, where can we go to next to pick up some other Nighthaunt models? My next shout would definitely be a Guardian of Souls. Now, definitely worth a mention at the moment, this model is maybe a little bit hard to come by, but it's not hard to convert one of these up. You could quite easily grab any of the other Nighthaunt heroes, sort of change him potentially with the Chainrasp leader's little candle lantern, and you've got yourself a Guardian of Souls. Effectively, give a candle or a lantern to any sort of other Nighthaunt character and you've got this model. At the moment you probably can find them on eBay or somewhere else as well for a cheapish price. They go up and down there all the time, but I do think he is definitely well worth a buy. For starters, he's got the Nightmare Lantern where you add 1 to the wound roll for Nighthaunt units near him. He also has Spectral Lure as his spell, which allows him to return models or wounds characteristics worth of models to units nearby. Definitely a unit worth grabbing for your Nighthaunt. He's going to keep everything in the fight longer and also make them do the fighting better. Next up, we have Hexwraiths. These are your Nighthaunt cavalry. Now, what's interesting about these, I've got 2 units in here that are going to do different sort of builds inside the Nighthaunt list. So Hexwraiths have a cool sort of thing they can do. They do mortal wounds when they pass over enemy units. They're one of your many battle line options you get. And they also do mortal wounds with their frightful touch as well. So in your movement phase with Spectral Hunters though, you've got immediately after this unit is moved, you can pick an enemy unit that has any models that this unit moved across. If you do so, roll a dice for each model in this unit that passed across the enemy unit, and for each 5+, the unit suffers a mortal wound. You've got that cool ability. You then have the ability to get Frightful Touch, which gets you 6s to hit on your scythes. It does in mortal wounds. Some cool mortal wound output out of this cavalry unit. The Cruelghast Cruciator is the newest Nighthaunt model in the range, and he's definitely another model I really like. He has a cool sort of shooting attack with his Phantasmal Torture, and if he ends up doing any wounds with it, he increases your Deathless Minion save, your ward save that you get for being a Death unit or Nighthaunt in particular, to a 5+ around him rather than a 6+. A cool little buff piece you can use to really make some of your units stick around that a little bit longer. Spirit Host is last. Now, this kit is notoriously bad to put together, but it does have a great build inside the Nighthaunt army. Spirit Hosts have a decent amount of wounds at 3, and they've got a 4-up save base, and they've got the Frightful Touch where they do mortal wounds on 6s to hit with 6 attacks. So you're guaranteed like 1 mortal wound on average to get through for each Spirit Host base, but you know, these things can spike with the amount of attacks they have and do a ton of mortal wounds. There's also some really cool abilities where you can bring back these units to make them really, really tough to take down in large numbers. Last up though, we've got a little sample army list here for you to sort of show how you can work with Nighthaunt. Now for starters, we've gone for the grand strategy Predator's Domain, with the ability of Nighthaunt to sort of ignore terrain and just have that movement ability across the table, plus with our general being a Dreadblade Harrier and all the teleporting he can do around the table, Predator's Domain is a great grand strategy for this army. For a Triumph, we've gone for Bloodthirsty. We're at 735, so there's a chance we're going to get it, being 15 points under. And Bloodthirsty is the reroll to charges unit, trying to get that big 10. And so a Dreadblade Harrow is our general. He's going to have the command trait Ruler of the Spirit Host. This allows him to bring back models around him. He can bring back any models he wants. So this definitely helps sort of just keep our units in the fight. And then we're going to have a Guardian of Souls with Nightmare Lantern. We've talked a little bit about them before on how they're a great buff piece, both for bringing back your models and also giving that +1 to wound. He's going to have the Infernal Lantern, which is the Beacon of Nagashizar. Now this is a really cool artifact. So what this one does is, if the bearer successfully casts a Spectral Lure spell, so this is a spell on his War Scroll, and it's not unbound, instead of the normal effects, you can either heal D6 plus 3 wounds to an allocated target unit, or if they have no wounds allocated to the unit, you can return a number of slain models equal to the combined wounds characteristic of D3 plus 3. So a really solid rule to sort of give you some extra models back. I really like this artifact. He's going to have the spell Shade Mist as his spell. Shade Mist has a casting value of 6 and is successfully cast. Pick a friendly Nighthaunt unit wholly within 12. Use subtract 1 for wound rolls for attacks that target that unit. Once again, just making one of your units that little bit more survivable. Now, speaking of survivable units, the Guardian of Souls is probably going to hang out with our 20 Chain Rasp Horde. They've been reinforced one time, sticking them in a nice big blob. He's just going to keep them in the fight, and they're going to be a great objective holder for us. We've then got 2 units of 10 Grimghast Reapers. One of these is probably going to fly around with the Dreadblade Harrier, and the other unit probably sticking with our Chain Rasp Horde to be a sort of counterattack or going out on their own. Grimghast have that 4-up ethereal save, so they can survive quite a lot of damage and stick in the fight, and also be just generally quite fighty. This whole army is wrapped up inside a battle regiment, meaning it's going to be a 1-drop army. As mentioned, 735 points, so a good chance of getting that triumph there. We've got our 1 out of 1 reinforced units, no allies. 50 wounds is a nice solid amount of wounds for 750 points, and as mentioned, a 1-drop army. If you've been playing with Nighthaunt in the new edition of Warhammer Age of Sigmar, let us know in the comments below how you've been going with it. Love to hear from everyone. Well, that's the end of the video. We hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And if you'd like to, you can come over and chat more with us here at Sinful Gaming and our fine little community over on Discord. You'll find a link to that Discord in the description of the video. Lastly, we'd like to give a shout out to everyone who helps support the channel via Patreon and YouTube members. And if you'd like to help support the channel via Patreon or YouTube members, you can do so by one of the links in the video's description once again. But a special shout out to all our patrons: Christian Weir, James, Soren, Chaos Spawn, AJC, Kenny Lyle, Outer and Shot First, Andrew Bowen, Nathan Fee, The Rising Ape, Cure Dynamic, Agu, Anthony B, and Dyna226. And another special shout out to our YouTube members: Greenridge Gaming, Kenton Young, Steve T, The Real Zeop, Chris Wallace, Turo12, Vinny, Lock Lorick, Matt Mollin, Becca Kinski Groupie, and the Johnny84. And lastly, a definite special shout out first of all to Lady Witchfox Art, who does all the amazing artwork for the channel, and to Xmorphic, who does all the background work for our Discord server, keeping everything there running smoothly, because I am completely computer illiterate. Thank you very much. But that's it for the video. Hope you enjoyed it. Please don't forget to leave a like and subscribe again. Stay safe, stay well, and most of all, keep fighting that war against the grey. Ciao for now.